So now that you're not getting what you wanted from the president, don't tell me you have now seen the light. Be gone. Your years of support are the reason we are in this mess, and you get no credit or forgiveness now that it's apparent to everyone that we are in a shit show. I don't want to hear it. Hello again. Welcome to the Ruthless Truth. I am your host, Truth Davis. In this forum, I share opinions, thoughts, truths on a wide variety of topics based on what I believe to be a unique life experience. And you can read and learn more about that in the notes or in the bio. My intent is to share stories and experiences and hopefully provide some life and career lessons that will assist you on your journey. Please follow me on Instagram at TruthDavis5, subscribe to the YouTube channel Ruthless Truth, and there's also a Facebook page, Ruthless Truth. General format, I'll share some commentary on current news or just my thoughts. Then I'll go deeper on one topic, which will be today's truth. And then I like to finish with an American history fun fact. Okay, first, welcome to the 50th episode of the Ruthless Truth. Wow, time does fly. And I'm not going to make a big deal about it today because in 3 weeks, we'll be celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the Ruthless Truth launch. But I just want to thank everyone who has ever listened to the program. You know, I open each episode with a statement that I address a wide variety of topics. Please know this is a very true statement. I encourage all of you to review previous episodes. The range of topics is indeed broad, and I'm sure you'll find something of interest. So, what's the hot news today? Well, a lot of the news today is really old news. I mean, we're still at war with Iran. The status of war seems to change daily. The partial shutdown of the federal government persists, extending the longest shutdown in the history of the country. And the do-nothing U.S. Congress continues to, do nothing. Okay, so what's really new? Well, one highlight from the previous week is that on April 17th, the S&P 500 reached an all-time high, closing at 7,126. After crossing the 7,000 mark for the first time on April 15th. So what does this mean to you? Well, I mean, it's good news for anyone with a retirement account such as a 401k or anyone else invested in the stock market, especially as the market has been down much of the year, only recently recovering. But the reason the market recovered and grew was because the president made many statements indicating the Iran war was nearing a close. Then, just a few days later, it appears that there's not an end in sight. I wonder, when is the market and investors going to realize that the president watches the market closely because he wrongly believes this is the scorecard for the U.S. economy as well as the success of his administration? He's in error on both counts. First, the stock market is not the economy, if for no other reason that 50% of U.S. households don't own any stock. Second, the president is well aware that the market immediately and at times significantly reacts to his comments. So he often makes statements that he knows will generate positive market reaction, at least on a short-term basis. So given this, the administration has often been accused of market manipulation. This belief is fueled by the fact that there's often major buy and sell activity just prior to the president's major statements. Sometimes these market moves occur just hours before a statement from the president. Unfortunately, insider trading is very difficult to prove. But many people, including me, believe there are a few people who have inside information and are profiting greatly from it. But I doubt there will ever be any investigations, and I would be shocked if anyone was ever brought up on charges. Also, there seems to be a growing chorus of long-term MAGA supporters now proclaiming their fading or lost support for the president. Specifically, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Candace Owens, and Tucker Carlson, just to name a few. Now they say they are disappointed in the president and feel they were lied to. And it seems they want or expect some recognition or positive reaction to their newfound enlightenment. No, I don't want to hear it. Let me first say this, and I've said it many times. I don't blame the president. I never blame people for being who they are. And he has been telling all of us for decades who he is. By word and deed, he tells you he doesn't respect women, especially women of color. He has consistently dismissed and attacked people of color. He demands universal loyalty and returns loyalty to no one but himself. He is childlike, simplistic, uninterested in reading, learning, or getting smarter on things he does not understand. He is who he is. Now, I blame the people who see all of this and either choose to ignore it or not to believe it, and only listen to the policies and rhetoric that benefits them. So now that you're not getting what you wanted from the president, don't tell me you have now seen the light. Be gone. Your years of support are the reason we are in this mess, and you get no credit or forgiveness now that it's apparent to everyone that we are in a shit show. I don't want to hear it. Okay, a final note. It has now been 10 years since the music died. Prince Rogers Nelson, known professionally as Prince, died on April 21st, 2016. He was by far my favorite artist of all time. Now, I'm a huge fan of a broad range of music, and I have attended over 200 live performances. But Prince was an extraordinary musician, songwriter, singer, and dancer. And he was the best live show ever. I was recently asked, if a person wanted to get into Prince, where should they start? And I say, start at the beginning, with his second album, simply entitled Prince. From there, he put out a new album every October for the next 6 years or more. You will be blown away by his range of styles. Enjoy. He will always be missed and never be forgotten. Okay, let's get to today's truth. Today's truth. As far as back as the mid-19th century, American culture, society, and economics were supported by the concept of the, quote, American Protestant work ethic. And this was the belief that working hard was as much about honor as it was about money. Some even viewed it as a religious calling. Of course, they conveniently ignored the millions of slaves who were working hard, receiving neither money nor honor. But that aside. But throughout the 20th century even, young workers were told that if they worked hard, paid their dues, they would be on the path to higher income and financial independence. Well, in today's truth, I want to address the so-called Protestant work ethic and how the hard work equals success narrative is increasingly seen as mythological due to growing income inequality. And also, the 9-to-5, 40-hour work week is rapidly disappearing, impacted by many factors, including the pursuit of any possible income stream other than the traditional 40-hour work week. And more importantly, how is this working out? And let me also acknowledge that today's truth was inspired by an article in the Wall Street Journal entitled "America Loses Its Will to Work," written by Barton Swain. Okay, so a few points I want to address. How is work getting done and how is it different? For people who are traditionally working, how are they approaching that? Why are young workers rejecting historical work ethic norms? And finally, going forward, what does this mean to all of us? Okay, so if the traditional 40-hour work week is disappearing, how is work getting done? Well, there are a combination of factors, including hybrid, remote, and flexible schedules. This trend was accelerated during COVID when many workers were not allowed to come into the office. Work at home and remote work became the norm. And it's interesting that some workers really enjoyed these new work dynamics, while there were others that hated it and didn't enjoy the isolation of working at home or alone. So, is it better? Well, it depends on who you ask, but if you ask me, it is not better for a few reasons. First, because of a lack of structured workday, employees are actually working more total hours per week. And this is due to the always-on culture where people feel or are expected to be available and productive around the clock. Second, the absence of casual in-person office interactions and shared meals, it reduces opportunities for building camaraderie and managing stress. In episode 19 of The Ruthless Truth, I talked about the dating crisis in America. Well, remote work is a contributing factor, as historically many people dated people they met at work. There are fewer of those opportunities now. Also, remote work eliminates the opportunity to receive informal mentoring, or to interact with senior executives, thus reducing career growth paths. And without a commute or physical separation, it becomes harder to separate work from personal life, leading to increased stress and burnout. So what can be done? Well, if you are provided with an opportunity to go into the office for a meeting or event, go, okay? Also, you yourself can occasionally schedule in-person meetings. And finally, maybe help organize some social gathering between you and your coworkers. Because if you do nothing, it will only increase your stress and hasten your burnout. Now, given all these issues with traditional work, we see many younger workers look for other ways to generate income. And one of the fastest growing pursuits for young men is gambling. During the pandemic, many men were stuck at home, bored, looking for ways to earn more money. And as a result, betting on sport events became more appealing. As evidence, Americans bet $5 billion on sports in the year 2018. By 2024, the amount had swelled to $150 billion. Also contributing to the growth is the major sport leagues have wholly and enthusiastically embraced and partnered with the gambling companies. You can't watch or attend a game without being bombarded with messages and promotions to encourage you to bet on the game. And what is the ultimate appeal here? Money for nothing. No work, no productivity, just an opportunity to make money without really doing anything. And continuing with that thought, a recent RAND study revealed that one out of 7 Americans aged 18 to 24 are not working, nor are they looking for work. Some youths are exploring or finding success in gig work, content creation, or online entrepreneurship, which really changes the perception of what constitutes work. And for Gen Zers and to younger millennials that want to work, many are flat out rejecting traditional jobs. They just don't believe it's worth it. Partially because they're not driven by the same goals as previous generations. Many in their 20s and 30s do not aspire to buy a house or start a family. This is evidenced by recent data that first-time home buyers represent an increasingly smaller share of all home buyers. And the U.S. birth rate is at an all-time low. Now, I must admit, I do struggle to reconcile these new attitudes about work, because with the images and messages that young people receive from social media, it appears many people are living lives filled with travel and luxury purchases. But that said, it's undeniable that not owning a home nor raising children greatly reduces living expenses. So there is more money available for leisure. So what are the implications of all this? Well, some social scientists and economists fear that this lower work ethics in America, often characterized by reduced dedication and shifting priorities among younger generations, threaten to diminish national productivity and economic growth. Future impacts include decreased corporate profitability, higher turnover, increased operational risk, and a potential decline in global competitiveness. And this is because the workforce seems to favor flexibility over traditional long-hour dedication. Here's what I believe must happen for the American businesses and economy to thrive going forward, faced with this emerging new work ethic. First, they got to adjust their approach to recruiting, developing, and retaining workers. They can't rely on the motivators that worked for them and their peers. They need to recognize that today's workforce has different priorities and demands, and that the successful companies of the future will adjust accordingly. Key adjustments could include embracing flexibility and balance. Support work-life balance through flexible hours or remote options, which help prevent burnout and increase job satisfaction. Also, they could better support individualism. Place a sincere emphasis on personal achievement, competence, and performance over hierarchy or seniority. Benefits. Expand your benefits and offer more flexible options, allowing workers to customize the best benefit package for themselves. This could include flexible time off policies, student loan repayment programs, child care, or even pet insurance. On pay, provide transparent pay policies, including cost of living adjustments in addition to merit pay. And this is just to name a few. Now, while I've outlined many changing trends in American work ethic, here's one thing that will never change. Businesses want to make money. And believe me, when they start seeing that staying the course is hurting the bottom line, they will make the necessary changes to remain thriving and profitable. It'll be interesting to see and experience this evolution over the coming years. Okay, let's get to today's American history fun fact. In today's American history fun fact, I want to tell the story of an extraordinary civil rights legend that you've probably never heard of. I was reminded of her last week when I saw her story posted by an online influencer who I wanted to credit here today. But you know how Instagram works. If you don't like it or save it, it's almost impossible to go back and find a post. So if any of you know who I'm talking about, just let me know and I'll acknowledge him in the future. Okay, here we go. Joan Trumpauer was born September the 14th, 1941 in Washington, D.C. and raised in Arlington, Virginia. Her family had been slave owners in Georgia, and her mom was the first in the family to marry a Yankee. Like many Southern Protestants, her family regularly attended church. But young Joan struggled to reconcile the morality she was taught at church with the segregation around her and the hatred that her parents espoused. As a child during summers, she would often visit her relatives in Georgia. And on one such occasion, when she was only 10 years old, a friend dared her to walk alone through Nigger Town, which is how her family referred to the black neighborhood just across the tracks. Joan accepted the challenge and she walked through the neighborhood, and no one bothered her. But when reflecting on it, she said, "No one said anything to me. But the way they shrunk back and became invisible showed me that they believed that they weren't as good as me." And in that moment, at age 10, Joan began to recognize the economic divide between the races. And she vowed at that time that she herself would do anything to help to be part of the civil rights movement and change the world. Now, while Joan had become enlightened, her family did not at all share her new views. Specifically, her desire for activism created tension and a divide between her and her mother. And as Joan approached completion of high school, she was considering colleges in Ohio and Kentucky. But her mom feared potential integration in those schools, so she insisted that Joan apply to Duke University, where she was accepted. Joan attended Duke for undergrad, and in the spring of 1960 participated in her first of many sit-ins. The idea of protecting the white women from blacks was something that Southern racism and segregation were supposed to be fighting for. So Joan's civil rights activism was not understood, being a white Southern woman. Just the idea of a white woman from the South defending the rights of blacks confused many people. And as a result, she was branded as mentally ill and was actually taken for mental evaluation after her arrest. Trumpower attended university for a year before she decided to drop out in search of a greater meaning in her life. And at this point, her family disowned her. Well, in the summer of 1961, the first Freedom Riders arrived in the South, working to register Negroes to vote. And an incident took place in Anniston, Alabama, where 2 buses were set on fire, and after the students escaped, they were then beaten by townspeople until the police intervened. While some thought this would deter future Freedom Riders, just the opposite happened. More Freedom Riders arrived, including Joan Trumpower, who, accompanied by Stokely Carmichael, made their way to the New South. Now, when this new group of Freedom Riders were arrested for refusing to leave a bus waiting area in Jackson, 19-year-old Joan and others were taken to Parchman Penitentiary. Now, Parchman was known for its violence, and many previous prisoners had simply gone missing. They were actually housed on death row for 2 months. Now, soon after her release in the fall of 1961, the University of Georgia admitted its first 2 black students. And one of the students was Charlene Hunter Galt. And an angry mob had gathered outside of her dorm, causing major damage and garnering national attention. And when Joan learned of this, she thought, now, if whites were going to riot when black students were going to white schools, what were they going to do if a white student went to a black school? Well, with this inspiration, Joan Trumpower dropped out of Duke and enrolled at Tougaloo College in Jackson, Mississippi, where she became the first ever white member of the historic black sorority Delta Sigma Theta. Also, while attending Tougaloo, several crosses were burned on campus, and Joan frequently received threatening letters. On May 28, 1963, Joan was one of 14 activists who staged a sit-in at the lunch counter at the Woolworths in Jackson, Mississippi. The students were beaten, smeared with condiments, and Joan was dragged out of the store by her hair. After her assailant was arrested just outside the store, Joan returned to the counter and stayed until the store was ultimately closed down for the day. Bill Miner, who was then Mississippi correspondent covering civil rights events for the New Orleans Times Picayune, and he was there that day, and he said, The Jackson Woolworth sit-in was, quote, the signature event of the protest movement in Jackson because it was the first one with real violence. After the incident, Joan remained active in the movement, attending the March on Washington that same summer of 1963. And a little known fact, Joan gave Michael Schwerner an orientation on what to know about being a white activist in the state of Mississippi. Tragically, the very next day, Michael was killed along with James Chaney and Andrew Goodman. Trump-Power later explained that she's aware that nothing she could have said or information she could have added would have given Schwerner that would have prevented what happened anyway. Now, following the Civil Rights Movement, Joan worked in various federal government departments, including the Department of Justice. And then she later taught English as a second language. She married Dan Mulholland, and the couple had 5 kids. And then they divorced in 1980. Today, Joan Mulholland is still alive. She's 84 years old, retired, and she lives in Virginia. Her legacy is impressive. But I want to point out 2 life lessons from Joan Trump-Power Mulholland. First, it should not be assumed or required that children will embrace the values of their parents. Because despite growing up in a Southern, white, racist household, at age 10, Joan knew their beliefs were wrong and she chose a different path. Second, while the oppressors and enslavers of Black people were almost all white, not all white people were enslavers and oppressors. From the pre-revolution Quakers to John Brown to Mary White Ovington to Joan Mulholland, let's not forget there have always been white people who risked their lives and livelihood supporting Black people and civil rights. These people had nothing to gain and plenty to lose, but were simply driven by a belief and commitment to do what was right. Okay, that's all I have for you today on The Ruthless Truth. Thank you again for listening. Again, follow me on Instagram at TruthDavis5. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Ruthless Truth. And there's also a Facebook page, Ruthless Truth. And again, I encourage you to review past episodes because I'm sure you'll find something of interest. Thanks again, and I will talk to all of you soon.